you want to hear from me again? Okay, sorry.
Thank you for honoring the servicemen who gave their life serving this country. My question is this. About 10 days ago, a 10-year-old student at an elementary school here in Escambia County was visited by two deputies, one in plain clothes, one in uniform. He was taken out of the classroom with a tape recorder. He was told to raise his right hand, that he was given a statement under oath. That 10-year-old child was questioned without his parent being notified before, during, or after by law enforcement. At the end of that school day, the principal said, "I feel so sick on my stomach, I want to throw up because we, as adults, dropped the ball." So my question to each of these gentlemen up here, what will be your policy on questioning children before their parents is present there to make sure this child's rights is protected?
Thank you for your question. As a matter of fact, I spoke to that child's mother this morning. Folks, there are some circumstances where some activity, some criminal thing is going on, and it's important that law enforcement officers talk to people right away. If there's even a remote possibility that there's someone at risk, officers need to have conversations, even if it involves children. But let's understand this. A 10-year-old has not the ability to understand their Fourth Amendment rights. And just because the police officers want to talk to them when they're 10 years old does not mean that their Fourth Amendment rights go away. That's why there's a requirement that for juveniles to be interviewed by law enforcement officers, that they have to do it in the presence of a parent or a custodial person. Under those circumstances, they could have done it with a teacher or a principal present in the room. If there were some exigent circumstances, they could have conducted those interviews. If I'm your sheriff, the policy will be that the officers will adhere to the law and the requirements of the law and make every effort to engage the parents, even when they're talking to 10-year-olds. Thank you.
And that is exactly what occurred. There was a potential violent situation that a rumor was going around the school, and so the officers intervened. The school system was the one that actually called the Escambia County Sheriff's Office, and as a result of that, there was a custodial interview that was done with teachers present. So again, that requirement was met. And again, statutorily, you can conduct those interviews depending upon the circumstances themselves. We, in fact, reached out to the mother shortly thereafter, and out of 4 different students that were interviewed in that incident, she's the only one that complained about that. And we understood because of the safety of her son, et cetera, that retaliation was a consideration, because now they wanted to know, who had their child spoken about. Right? We completely understand that. But again, depending upon the circumstances, there's no one up here, I think, who would make a blanket statement that would say we will never interview a juvenile under those circumstances without the parent being present. Why? Because I can tell you this occurs on a daily basis, where we have contact with juveniles, where we would love to give them a civil citation and send them on their way. Well, we can't get a hold of a custodial parent. We can't get a hold of anyone that is in that home. And so our officers will spend 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours with the inability to contact anyone in that home. And so therefore you cannot hobble law enforcement, especially in a circumstance such as that, where it's a time-critical situation.
Once again, I am a certified school resource officer. I did 3 years at Ransom and then 2 years at Tate. My wife thought it was a great idea to spend some time with my kids, since I've worked mostly nights in my career. And this was an opportunity for me to get out and to bond with the community up there where I live. I ran into these situations. The school system has in place policies that dictate contacting the parents. You try not to ever traumatize a child. You won't, as a school resource officer, as a deputy sheriff, you won't to be somebody that these kids can run to. You do not ever want to frighten one or intimidate them. There are exigent circumstances as they have been talked about. Sometimes things are beyond your control. Just go with it. That's part of the good and the bad of the job. But I do agree that at all times possible, we should have someone else, a teacher, a principal, someone there to ensure that these children are not being sometimes we get overzealous, trying to protect people. We just have to do the best we can do and take the law as it allows us and protect our roads.
I agree that exigent circumstances sometimes dictate a response from law enforcement, but at the same time, I feel strongly that there should always be policies in place in how we do things, how we serve our community. And one of those things are that we should have a policy as to when exigent circumstances dictate interviewing a child that we may traumatize with that interview. But I understand that this child is now going through therapy. And I don't know the circumstances, and I don't know what the exigent circumstances were. Sometimes we have to err on the side of caution in what we do and how we do it, and who's doing the interview has a lot to do with it. Now, we do have resources out there that will come out and assist us with interviewing kids under circumstances of different situations. Again, this response is basically dictated by the exigent circumstances, and I understand people's concern about that and how we interact with the kids of that age. Certainly, parents, by all means, if we're able to get hold of the parents, we should certainly try to get hold of those parents and interview that kid with their parents, someone in charge, a custodian. So, again, I have to agree with most of the panelists up here. It depends on exigent circumstances and the situation at hand. We cannot always dictate that, and every situation is different.
I agree that you can't always contact a parent. I was in charge of Pensacola Beach for a long time. We'd get kids over there that were drinking. Mom and dad couldn't be reached. But we in law enforcement have a responsibility to that child. Sitting in this room is a prior superintendent of schools. The gentleman that asked the question, I've worked with him on many situations. Ellison knows that we always try to do the right thing. I understand it may take 7 hours of a deputy sheriff. I understand that. But we have a responsibility to that child that if we do not do anything that will mess his emotions up, to make him hate law enforcement and hate authority, that's part of what we raise our right hand for. To enforce the law and do the right thing. School resource officers have a very hard job. In many cases, they have to manage children that mom and dad don't manage. That's a terrible position to put a deputy sheriff in or a city policeman in. Very, very hard. He should be there to encourage those kids to do the right thing, to teach a class, showing them what law enforcement is all about. I know that Rex did that. I know for a fact. Sometimes we get pushed out of our role. Sometimes things happen. I agree with what David said, totally. You have to make a decision. If it has dangerous implications, you must act. I agree with that. But you know what? You should have school officials in the room with you, and I understand you said that did happen. I agree with that. But we have a responsibility to the students that sometimes the parents don't take. We have that responsibility.